Brothers and sisters of the professional world, it is I, Jo-Madugu, here to speak to you again about the travels, no, about like say my corporate experience. And today, on Friendly Legal Babble, I, Nemo, will be taking you on my experience with day 2 of the Capital Markets Association, the West African Capital Markets Conference. It was fun. I to an extent, I guess, as much as a conference can be fun. I missed most of the morning parts, so I apologize if anyone was expecting that I would let you know what happened. I missed most of the morning parts. It was just one of those sessions. It was just one of those times when you get to work and chaos ensues. Like the minute you sit down to put 1 and 2 together, just madness ensues. So I couldn't really do that. I apologize. And I really wanted to, because also for myself, I think that this morning they were going to speak on some legal things, legal aspects of infrastructure financing, and different other financing considerations that they were speaking at during the event. But unfortunately, I missed it. So please bear with me. By the time I got in, they were already towards the tail end of the last session, which was on sustainable financing. And before I get into that, I just want to say, between you and I, between the general populace, a lot of us go to these conferences to network. Primarily, I think, solely maybe, promotes your business or whatever it is. Please, take a body spray, take a gum, take whatever it is, make yourself presentable. How in God's name am I supposed to network with someone that the minute they breathe, I'm thinking to myself, this is the end. I am going to go to the other side now. The smell. Oh, anyway. So I think just like on that was on a lighter note, but seriously speaking, the way you present yourself really matters. And also just it's difficult for someone to have a networking conversation or just even a basic conversation of hi, how are you, if the minute you breathe in the person's face, they're thinking to themselves, this person is carrying some kind of, I don't know, apocalyptic curse in their mouth. And it's probably maybe you just had something bad to eat or you'd been silent most of the day. So pop a gum, pop a sweet, gargle with Listerine, do something before you start talking to people. I beg of you. So on today's event, by the time I got in, it was on sustainable financing that they were speaking about, and it was pretty good. I liked it. Again, most of the people that speak at these events, I guess one of the things that they're focusing on because of time is also just to promote their business, and so they tell you a lot about what they've been doing. I have to say, I found it quite interesting that somebody had mentioned at some point when he used to work with a UK, like a government related company, NGO of some sort. And what they did, or what used to happen was that sometimes they'd call him up in the middle of the night and tell him that we have XYZ amount of money to invest in a Nigerian company, but in Nigeria, but we don't know who to put that money in. First of all, put it in me. Invest in me. I am a sustainable business. As an entity, as a human being, I'm a sustainable business. But second of all, I think that it was interesting that he mentioned that they had options of going into Ghana instead, and that I think maybe the barrier to entry was better. I'm not too sure of the reasons why, because if I recall correctly, even registering a company in Ghana can be relatively expensive. So I'm not really sure that we're able to get into the details of what the whole issue was, because he was using more of an anecdote just to say that there was funds available, but not necessarily explaining like what the issues were or how companies could position themselves to become more attractive to investors. So I think he mentioned those in bits and pieces, but really, and forgive me, is almost the dead of the night. So personal hygiene and aside, and sustainable financing moving forward, it was quite interesting just to see people speak about sustainable financing. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe the start of my master's degree, and I did a research program. So that was for 2 years. So let me just take it back to maybe 2015 or so. And I think it was maybe just before that, around that time, everywhere you turn, sustainable financing, sustainable investment, blah, 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 blah. And it still happens, but I'm not sure people carry it around now as they used to or as much. I think especially because now that there are a lot of avenues for you to actually attempt to do sustainable, even if it's on like a everyday or common scale. So let's think of the people that are doing solar panels or wind turbine is common in certain parts of the world and certain parts of Nigeria too. I think in the north especially. So sustainable financing is one of those areas that's really growing, and I'm happy that they spoke about it today. And sustainable financing, it's really interesting that there are a lot of businesses that are open, or a lot of organizations rather, especially development finance institutions, which I'm so fascinated by them, and they are open to investing, and there are a lot of funds that are available to investing in sustainable products. So it's one of those things that they really spoke about today of what their businesses, or the businesses that were there today, had been doing. Again, some of them were government related, some of them were policy related, and if I recall correctly, the person that spoke about people not having, or investors not having a way to bring in money to Nigeria. He was speaking from a policy perspective as to what governments could do to make the country more investor friendly, and the concerns that you bring in money, you also want returns, and you want a way out to get those returns. And maybe on another episode, I'll speak um, about like capital importation and things like that, but not today. So it was interesting that he spoke of that. I would like to use the opportunity to mention really that companies that are setting themselves up to get this financing, and these are companies that from like small scale, big scale. I think Google is doing one now, or has some funding. I've seen in the news, and if I can find them, I'd quickly just put those links below, of people that are doing certain sustainable or clean energy, well, that's also related, activities or projects, investments, companies, and there's a lot of money available, but it's really about positioning yourself to be able to access that money. That really matters. So they didn't speak about that. Again, no lawyer was there, but I really think that preparing yourself, preparing your company to get that, so having the right people on the board, having your books in order, having your finances in order, again, books, all the regulatory requirements that you might need depending on the sector you're working with, that's like super, super essential. And so this is one of the things that I really feel they didn't mention, but again, it's just hinting around it. Another reason why I think people that have the capacity, or at least the interest in growing a business, could explore sustainable financing, apart from the fact that there's money on ground, is that also uh, there is there are also incentives on ground. So in Nigeria, we have, I believe, green bond rules, which are covered within the SEC code, and regulated by SEC, that's the Securities and Exchange Commission. And then we also have sustainable financing principles or guidelines, also released by the SEC. And these things just really give you an opportunity on how to invest in green bonds, and it now allows people that are in those spaces to acquire and get financing. So if I just read up a quick bit from what the SEC rules are on green bonds is a way of financing sustainable products. And am I speaking too fast? And if green bonds are any type of debt instruments that the proceeds of which would be exclusively, don't use the money to go and do something else, exclusively apply to finance or refinance in part or in full new and or existing projects that have positive environmental impacts. And I think maybe from the legal side of me is just thinking, when you say impact, it could be impact in the actual sense, or impact even in the, I don't want to say negative, but in the reducing sense. So impact in the sense that if somebody's business goal is that they are creating or generating clean energy by installing certain solar panels or things like that, that is going to qualify something as green bonds. But if somebody's activity also is maybe cleaning up the ocean, it's impactful, but you're taking something out. So in either way, it's really about the impacts that matters, and you claiming that something counts as a sustainable investment does not mean it is. So they will check, and there are regulatory and registration requirements and things like that for people to be able to benefit or to register green bonds and then use those green bonds to invest in businesses. And all these things really boil down to areas of interest. So not everybody that is raising funds through green bonds will be investing in all types of clean energy or sustainable investment projects or sustainable projects. So it is possible that an entity that is on its own, a maybe solar panel or wind or whatever else, electric vehicle company, so those people could also try to raise money through green bonds. It is possible. But on the other hand, there could also be fund our asset managers to also issue these bonds, and then through those bonds, I believe that's correct. My brain is blanking. The night is the night is young and it's not full of terrors, but it's full of exhaustion. And so those ones could also release bonds and then issue from the money that they've raised, issue it and use that to invest in other types of businesses that are again have to be sustainable related goals. So what the point I was trying to make is that because somebody raises those funds, maybe from an asset management perspective, a fund management perspective, their business goal could still be focused on maybe primarily investing in clean energy or clean transportation. So that it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be investing in all types of sustainable projects possible. So if you are from the investor side, is something. Oh, sorry, if you are from the project side or a company that's seeking investment, that's something you have to bear in mind. That what can I really access? And so again, the capital market. That's what this whole conference is about. They were speaking on how to access the market and encouraging people to participate in the market and access the funds that are there that are available. Funny thing I learned during this thing, but that was yesterday, not today, is that while Nigeria has over, I think, 100 and something publicly listed companies, Ghana only has like 40 something, I think 47. That's quite small. But again, that's just a listed company. Doesn't necessarily mean that those are the only companies that do capital market transactions. Clearly, like other companies would do a lot of financing, raising funds through the capital markets. The capital markets basically now regulates capital raising from the public. And maybe this is something I should have said yesterday. So I'll just take a little step back to give some introduction on basic corporate structures. I know it's late, but let me just put that there. So generally speaking, a company in Nigeria can only have 50 shareholders in the company. That's a private company. There are other types of companies, but a private company can only have 50 shareholders. That means, in general, or in most often, only 50 people, basically, only 50 people, 50 entities, legal persons can invest in that company. There are ways that more people invest where they are joint shareholders holding the same shares or things like that. But generally speaking, that's the cap. But the thing is that if I want to raise funds, I can have maybe 10 people, but that doesn't mean I want to bring in the extra 40 people to come on board. Or even how am I going to select those people? So instead, what you can end up doing is that you can go to the market and then issue bonds and issue commercial papers and issue things like this to bring the public involved in your capital raising efforts for funds and things like that, as opposed to you trying to exhaust your 50% shareholding, and also as opposed to you going one by one to look for people like, excuse me, please, can you give me some money for my company? You go there and then you list and people buy into the bonds or the papers that you're issuing. And that basically is what happens. You go through the issuing houses, you go through the again, blank brain, you go through the lawyers, obviously. And so those are the things that's the way it works. I am not going to bore you with more of my rambling. I think I'm just going to go through the last bit of it, which is on I think the principles. So yes, the principles for the principles for infrastructure finance, or sorry, for sustainable financing, they are really guidelines. Or the guidelines for sustainable financing are really broad principles, and these broad principles um, are relevant to guide companies, but there's also an expectation, especially for public companies, that they should uphold these principles, and they're also required to do their ESG financing. So, their ESG filing and reporting with the SEC, which they are regulated by. So if you're a company that's investing in accessing funds, it really is essential that whether you're public or not, especially if you're SEC regulated, that you would still be required to comply with ESG reporting. Again, going back to sustainability. So that's environmental, social, and I think governmental. Again, blank brain. So I know that there were a lot of, would I say, comments or errors here, but please feel free to just drop a comment on whichever aspect of the subject I think I missed, or something that you thought I would, or you wish I had explained more on, or something I mixed up. I really don't mind. I really would want this to be more interactive, in the sense that if I say something, you can just comment on what you think. Okay, well, maybe I think this is the position instead. I honestly don't mind. And I think that's the last of it. I'm not going to stretch this any longer. It was again fun recording this, although clearly my brain is like in out, in out, in out. But I'm hoping that through this infrastructure financing is through this entire conference, and through the projects and the efforts that the regulators, both from Nigeria, from the French speaking parts of Africa and West Africa, and also the Ghana, that the joint regulators put ways together for us to allow us to invest across, and they are working on this. There's an MOU for them to navigate, working towards a joint market for us to invest in these different markets. And I'm also hoping that the financing is democratized to just allow the everyday person to be able to participate in it. But more importantly, like I'd mentioned yesterday, the system, the African economy, the Nigerian economy needs so badly to regain the trust of its people. The trust level is just so low, at least for me. And educated, I would say, so at least for me, but the trust level is just so low in the system that there's a lot of building that has to go into it for people to trust it. But also that there has to be an easier barrier to entry. And I think a couple of apps like Trove and stuff, I am not promoting these. I think Chaka, if they still exist, they were trying to do that, making the barrier to entry easier for the everyday person, so that we can invest in it. And the more we invest in it, the more that we can participate and understand and critique and grow the system. And then lastly, for people obviously that are already listed or interested in raising funds through the capital market, I hope that the comments here concerning your expectations, or the expectations from a operational corporate background, really gives you an insight on what is expected of you, and how to ensure that your business is ready to actually start seeking funds, but b also receiving funds as well. This has been fun for the past 2 days. Tomorrow I'm not sure I'm going to do this. I'm proper knackered, but it has been fun. Good night, and again, it is I, Jo-Madugu, speaking to you. Bye.